Hey everybody, I'm just now leaving the theater. Just got done watching The Jungle Book, which is much, much better than I would have expected it to be. And before I get too far in what makes it awesome, one word: pangolin. There is a pangolin in this movie. That's enough reason to go see it. I mean, come on, that's fantastic. But yeah, it's way better than I would have expected, like in every possible way. I was pretty skeptical overall when I first saw that this was coming out, mostly because I'm like, do we need this? The answer is no, not really. But since Disney is hell-bent on making every animated movie it's ever done into a live action, oh well, this one worked out really, really great. I was also pretty skeptical because I'm never, even as good as CG has gotten, I'm never completely convinced that it's the best ever. So even if it's really, really good, it's like, that still looks really fake, and that's kind of hard for me to buy into it because it doesn't look real at all. But I was impressed from very early on. There were some early scenes that when they go from a very cartoony opening Disney credit scene into the live action jungle, it's smooth and it's pretty seamless. And on more than one occasion, I would stare at an animal and think, well, maybe that one's real. And then it wouldn't be. And then I thought, well, then I guess I'm sold. I'm not gonna get into anything like, well, it's better than the cartoon or not better than the cartoon, but there is one thing that did really well here, and that is that the characters have much better motivations in this one than they do in the original cartoon. Mowgli with the rest of the animals are all at a watering hole when Shere Khan shows up. He recognizes that the man cub is there and says, I'm gonna kill it. And they said, you can't. The law of the jungle says at this time, with us gathered at this place, you can't do it. He's like, fine, I'm gonna do it later, and I'll kill everyone if you get in my way. So later on, the wolves get together and they say, well, he's gonna kill all of us, so we might want to get rid of the man cub. We gotta get rid of this guy, he's a liability. And that's kind of what kicks the whole thing off. Now, Mowgli does take the action into his own hands, says, fine, I'll get out of here because I don't want anyone to get hurt. But that works for me. It gives us a good reason why Mowgli has to leave, because he cares about everybody else and he doesn't want them to get hurt because of him. The casting is fantastic. The characters are really, really great. Bill Murray as Baloo, it just fits. When you want to talk about motivations, this Baloo makes a lot of sense. The old cartoon Baloo was just like, hey, let's have fun because we can have fun. This Baloo is like a con artist. I think he's actually even called that in the movie, so I'm probably stealing that. But Bill Murray as Baloo is a guy who has something that he can gain from having Mowgli around, and so he keeps him around so he can be lazy and get all the honey he wants. The rest of the cast is really great. Ben Kingsley as Bagheera is great, very fatherly, very fierce when he needs to be, also kind of the curmudgeon. It works great. Idris Elba as Shere Khan, awesome. More on him in a little bit. Christopher Walken as King Louie is ridiculous, but so perfect. You didn't realize how awesome that would be, and it really just, it's awesome. It's good. I do wish they had a little bit more for Scarlett Johansson to do, because when Kaa shows up, you're kind of like, ooh, this is gonna get good and creepy, and it is. It's all that. But she's in it so briefly, that's a little bit of a shame. So I wasn't really looking forward to this movie. I knew it was coming out, and I think the first full trailer I saw was when I went and saw Zootopia, and when my kids saw the trailer, they were thinking, what is that? And can we see it? Should we see it? They really didn't know what to think, because you can tell even from the trailer that this movie is a bit more intense. And I'll tell you, I made the right call not bringing them to see this movie. Of course, this is entirely because I know my kids, and I know what they are and are not afraid of, and I know what they're sensitive to. This movie is very action-packed. From the very beginning, you're in the middle of an action sequence, of which there are several, and in many cases, you don't know what's going to happen. For instance, when Kaa shows up, she's freaky. You find a giant snakeskin in the jungle, there's lots of vines, so you're not sure which one is gonna be Kaa, and then the vines start moving. Not to mention, she is just about to eat that kid. It's creepy, it's scary, and I can just picture my kids, who are 3 and 6, having those images in their mind, and I'm gonna be woke up in the middle of the night because they're freaking out a little bit. King Louie has the same thing. He's a gigantic orangutan sitting in a temple. Really well shot, really cool when he shows up. But for a really little kid, it's gonna be kind of creepy. And finally, Idris Elba as Shere Khan. So good, but this tiger is scary, like full on scary. He's mean. People die in this movie. Characters get taken out like nothing. There's a lot of action and violence and all that stuff. And because it is that part live action, part motion capture, part CGI. I think that adds an intensity that you need to be aware of if your kids are gonna come see it. And for mine at 6 and 3, they're not ready for it, not yet. There's some jump scares, just the tone of it kind of shifts a lot into this dark, shadowy, creepy music moments that they're gonna be a little unsettled. So what are the downsides? Every once in a while the CGI does not hold up. When you see Mowgli walking around with everything, you look at it and you're like, no, I'm not buying it. It doesn't work. That's not even close to looking like they're in the same room at all. Also, some of the action sequences are really hard to kind of follow along, and that makes sense. I mean, the actor playing Mowgli, Neil something. I should have paid more attention to that. He's a young actor. He can't do all these things, and you gotta do a lot of weird shots to make sure the action stays going, especially among all the CGI. Now, the benefit is it doesn't look like they CGI'd him much at all to fit into the action, so that's a major benefit. But instead you get really short and choppy sequences that are kind of hard to figure out exactly what's going on, and that's a little rough on the eyes, and not as cool as it probably could have been. Finally, the last thing that is really kind of odd, and I'm surprised and not surprised that it made it in there, and that's all the songs from the original. Now, not all the songs are there, but a lot of them are. Bare Necessities, of course, shows up. But King Louie's song, I Want to Be Like You, is in there, and even the song that Ka sings, which I don't even know what it's called. I forgot it existed. Trust in Me. I'm going to go with Trust in Me. They're all in there in some way, shape, or form. Now, when Bare Necessities showed up first, I'm like, this works for me, because Baloo's just kind of mumbling it to himself, and it's not a big deal. They don't draw a lot of attention to it. But before long, it's becoming a larger number with Mowgli and Baloo singing it together. A little weird. King Louie's song especially was just like, what? This is so bizarre, because he's so menacing and creepy, and he's like a mob boss, and then he starts singing it, and you're like, why? Why is this happening? And speaking of tone, I think that's the thing that this movie was trying to find the right balance of, and I think they did a pretty good job, because they wanted to make it more adventure, and they wanted to make it a little bit darker, and you can tell, and it works when it does that very well, but they are trying to keep in mind that kids are going to see it and families are going to see it, so you do have a couple of sequences that are very lighthearted and very fun, but they feel very out of place as well. There is a little bit of an environmental message in here, but not strong. It's more complex and more complete, and I like that. One of the things that Mowgli is picked on for early on is that he uses tools. He builds things and creates things to use because he's a human being, and his wolf parents are not okay with it. They're like, why are you using these tricks? That's not what wolves do, and we're raising you to be a wolf. Shere Khan, of course, sees Mowgli as a threat because he's a person, and people are the ones that are responsible for fire, which he's terrified of. And so that's an ongoing theme, that you have to be careful of this thing that only people can create. Throughout the film, Mowgli gets better and better at building things. He finds better uses for them, and we see how he can thrive because of his use of technology. But as the movie progresses, we also see that because of his technology, the rest of nature is in danger, that he is a threat to them if he can't find the most responsible way to work with the technology that he has, that everything else is defenseless against. I don't feel like this message is too heavy-handed, like it could be. It makes for a weird narrative device when they're telling Mowgli, don't use your tricks and don't do that, and you're not really sure why they say you can't do that, and it feels a little bit forced and weird. But kind of when you throw in everything else with the fire and the rest of the tools, it makes a little bit of sense, because that's the real challenge I think that people will constantly have to face so long as we're hanging out on this planet, is we have a ridiculous amount of advantages over everything else on this planet, and we use the planet to our use, for sure. This movie, I think, is calling for at least some kind of moderation in how we do that, to not completely go nuts, because if we completely go nuts, we destroy the things around us that we care about. But we do need to use them, otherwise we don't survive at all. So go check out The Jungle Book. It's surprisingly good, and if you like the old cartoon, you're gonna like this. They do a lot of things that are faithful, they change up a few things, but there's a lot of nostalgia wrapped in there. Again, not super heavy-handed, and they do some cool stuff with it. It's worthwhile. Again, if you got small kids, they're gonna get freaked out a little bit through the jump scares, creepy tone, and you know, the death rages that Shere Khan goes on. But it's good. I'd say, if I can put an age to it, if you got a kid that's hanging around 10 years old, they're probably fine, I hope. But again, it's your kid. You know them, I hope. So you make those calls for yourself. Anyway, go check it out. I'll see you next time.